Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Congressman Pete Stauber's Telephone Town Hall. We are glad that you joined us this afternoon. Today, you will have the opportunity to hear about many issues that are important to Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, as well as what Congressman Stauber has been working on in Washington, D.C. You will also be able to speak directly with Congressman Stauber to ask a question. We look forward to thoughtful and respectful dialogue. A reminder to please press *3 to ask a question at any time during the call. Again, press *3 to ask a question at any time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Congressman Pete Stauber. I'm so glad that you all can join me for this telephone town hall, and I hope you're weathering the snow back home. I will start this call with a brief overview of recent legislative action, and then open up the floor for you to ask questions. As you heard Kelsey say, press *3 if you would like to ask a question. I want to begin by saying what an honor it is for me to represent you in Congress. The responsibility endowed to me by Northeastern Minnesota is not lost and is something I carry with me throughout my time. As your representative in Congress, I'm excited to tell you that constituent service is a central function of our office. Whether it's helping veterans or seniors secure the benefits they deserve, coordinating a tour of our U.S. Capitol for families visiting Washington, D.C., or flying a flag over the U.S. Capitol to commemorate an important event, or by helping individuals navigate the difficulties of a federal agency, my staff and I are here to serve you. If you need assistance, then I encourage you to call my office at 218-481-6396 or visit my website at stauber.house.gov. You know, it's hard to believe we are just over 100 days into the 116th Congress, and while some in the media would have you believe that Congress is broken, I am proud to tell you that I am committed to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find common sense solutions to the most pressing issues facing our nation. So far, great bipartisan work has already been accomplished on behalf of Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. As some of you know, I worked as a law enforcement officer in Duluth for just over 2 decades. In that time, I organized and negotiated on behalf of my union. That being said, I know what it is like when the pensions you fought hard to save are at risk of being lost. There are currently more than 1,400 multi-employer plans covering 10 million people across the country. Unfortunately, participants of these plans, through no fault of their own, are facing a dire situation for their retirement. One of my main missions in Congress is to ensure Minnesotans don't lose the benefits they've worked hard to earn over a lifetime. That's why it was a no-brainer for me to co-sponsor H.R. 397, the Rehabilitation for Multi-Employer Pensions Act, more commonly known as the Butch-Lewis Act. This critical legislation would help financially support these multi-employer pensions so they don't fail and millions of Americans don't see the retirement security that they earn. Along with protecting pensions, I'm also committed to protecting Medicare and Social Security and ensuring these critical programs remain intact. In fact, I recently joined a bipartisan group of colleagues in sending a letter to preserve and strengthen the Medicare Advantage program for seniors in Minnesota and across this nation. As Minnesota's seniors have worked their entire lives, I recently sponsored H.R. 141, the Social Security Fairness Act of 2019. This legislation would eliminate 2 provisions that have unfairly penalized educators, police officers, and public servants across Minnesota and the nation for far too long. By eliminating the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, we can provide certainty to retirees who have devoted much of their lives to public service. As we work with the President to secure a budget for fiscal year 2020, I will work to ensure that we continue to adequately fund these critical programs on which countless Minnesotans rely. One of the biggest issues facing our nation is health care. I believe that Minnesotans deserve high-quality, affordable, and accessible health care that is patient-driven and physician-guided. Unfortunately, since Obamacare was enacted, healthcare has steadily become less affordable. I believe that we can and must do better. However, I recently voted in favor of a non-binding resolution supporting coverage for pre-existing conditions. While I didn't particularly like the tone of the resolution, I don't believe we should strip Minnesotans of Obamacare's provisions until a new and better health care law can be put in place. Before we repeal Obamacare, both sides of the aisle must come together and work on a comprehensive plan that lowers costs, increases access to quality health care, and protects pre-existing conditions. While I was on the campaign trail, I made a promise to Minnesotans that I would protect coverage for those living with pre-existing conditions. This is a promise I intend to keep. So I became a sponsor of H.R. 692, the Pre-Existing Conditions Protection Act. Regardless of what happens in the courts, this legislation will ensure that coverage for pre-existing conditions is never eroded. I am so honored and humbled to have the opportunity to represent you here in Congress. With that being said, if you want to ask a question, please press *3, and we will get started right away. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. Up next, we have Doug from North Branch. He is going to ask a question about legalizing marijuana. Doug, you are now live on the call.
Hi. I used to be employed as a chem dep psych tech at a chemical dependency health recovery center, and I am myself. I'm currently straight and sober for over 12 years, and it's my belief that, based on my experience, that legalizing of marijuana would cause a lot more health problems among teens and cause a lot more car accidents on the highway, for recreational use. And I wondered what the congressman's opinion on it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. That's a great question. So, that's part of the discussion in the state of Minnesota. And I have to I'll bring you back to my law enforcement experience for 23 years. I saw the devastating effects of drugs, and I saw the devastating effects of using marijuana, where it can chemically alter a young individual's development and brain. And so I can say that I am not in favor of legalizing marijuana. I think that it's a gateway drug. And I think that people that use it at a younger age, they tend to that tends not to be, quote, enough for them, so they have to go and experiment with maybe a more potent drug to get them high, and then they just spiral downhill. I've seen that. I have personally seen that in law enforcement, and I can share with you that in my days at the City of Duluth Police Department, I spoke to 4 parents about their kids using marijuana. And one of the parents, when I told her that her son is not only using and dealing marijuana, she said, "Oh boy, I'm just glad it's not meth." And I couldn't believe that, because this is a highly educated woman that said that. And it just so happens that 3 of those 4 individuals are not with us today. They have overdosed. 3 of the 4 overdosed on drugs. So I think that marijuana is the gateway drug. I asked my good friends who want to possibly have it legal, I said, don't we have enough impaired drivers on our roads already? And you want to put more impaired drivers? We have enough people right now that are chemically dependent or addicted to drugs that need treatment, Doug, that we don't need additional legalizing of a drug that really takes the initiative out of someone's life. And I think that from my experience, that I see it as a gateway drug, and I would not support the legalization of smoking marijuana in the state of Minnesota.
All right. Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. Up next, we have Judy, who has a question about Social Security. Judy, you are now live on the call.
Hello. My question is when you were saying about supporting Social Security and getting it so it'll last for a longer length of time, that it would be a sound system of being able to fund Social Security. And what I'm wondering is that I worked all my life, and I always paid Social Security. They always took it out of my check because I was below whatever the line was, whether it cut off at $60,000 or whatever it was. At the time, I always had to pay. Why don't you just make it so no matter what you earn, everybody has to continue to pay? There is no cutoff line at the end of, during the year or monetary as to what you can earn. That would make it real solid.
Yeah. I will say this. I agree with you that, my parents are in their mid-80s, and they too have paid into Social Security all their life. It's something that we promised them and that they earned. And I think that what we'll do is for me to increase. To make sure that the Social Security stays for the next generation. One of the things we can do is obviously have more people paying into it. And when you have people paying into it, it has the ability to sustain itself longer. For instance, in 1964, when the Social Security was initiated, 64, 65, we had upwards of 20, 30 people paying in for one. Right now, all estimates are going to say it's about 2 3/4 of a worker paying in for every recipient, and so that's not sustainable. So what we have to do is get people paying into it, get them in the workforce and getting good paying jobs and paying into it. But I'm one that wants to protect Social Security. It's something that I've said it's benefits that you earned and you were promised, and we're going to keep those benefits to you. It's an important part of retirement. It's an important part of making sure that we have we make that commitment to the seniors that they deserve it and they paid into their entire life.
Okay, thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Stoddart's Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next we have Tara, and she has a question about Planned Parenthood. Tara, you are now live on the call.
Yes, I was wondering what your position was with the Planned Parenthood coming in to teach their morals and values and transgender and just putting their input into the school systems.
That's a great question, Tara, and I appreciate it. We have, when I went to school, we had health class, and we went through some of those classes involving sexual education and what have you. And I went to Duluth-Denfeld, and it was I recall it was very very basic, and the parents were told about it. And I think that for me, I've always talked about that the parents should be the real educators on this. And I think that I know across some parts of the state, because people have called me that would rather not have certain people in their classroom teaching their kids about sexual education and abortion and what have you. I think that that can cause divisiveness in the classroom and amongst the parents. So I think that what we ought to do is go back, I think, to what we did maybe when I was growing up. It was that general education involving sexual education, and really a lot of the parents need to. We as parents, I'm the parents of 4 children. We need to be the educators and talk to our kids. As hard as some people think it may be, I want my wife and I to be the educators primarily in that topic. So I know that there's been a lot of concern about that, and a lot of things that are talked about by certain groups that many parents, quite frankly, are not happy with. So, but my goal would be to allow the parents to be the best educators on this specific topic, just like when I grew up.
All right. Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next we have Al from Bovey, and he has a question about pensions. Al, you are now live on the call.
Mr. Stauber.
Hi, Al.
Howdy. I was wondering, I was a member of Carpenters Local 606 up on the range, and we have a pension fund out of Wisconsin. And it's not doing so well. But when you ask our district council or our international, is there anything you guys can do to help us out? You know, they say, well, you guys just got to keep putting more money into that. And I don't understand why we pay our district council and our internationals all this money, and they spend it on special interest groups, lobbyists, and everything else, and we can't get them to help us do something.
Al, that's a great question, and you know, I worked in law enforcement, and I have a pension, and it was promised to me when I retired. It has a deferred benefit, defined benefit rather. And so I can share this with you, Al, that I signed on to the Butch-Lewis legislation. I'm actually a co-sponsor, and that has to do with the multi-employer pension bill to be able to help out these pensions that are struggling financially, because it's not your fault or it's not other people's fault that paid into that pension, that they were promised security within that pension. It's not your fault. So what I want to do is make sure that we do it right. And when I say that, there's a lot of pensions that are doing very, very, very well. So some of those that need a little boost or need a little help, I'm supportive of that. And that's exactly what the Butch-Lewis resolution, the Butch-Lewis language states. It's about helping those out that are in need of help, and not taking or bringing down any of the ones that aren't in financial straits or what have you. So, like I say, Al, I appreciate your concern and working as a carpenter and earning that pension. So my job, along with my other colleagues in Congress, are to make sure that we take those pensions that are having some difficulty and give them the help they need without jeopardizing the ones that are doing very well. But again, if you look up the Butch-Lewis resolution that I co-sponsored, it's exactly that, making sure that we're protecting those the pensions that you were promised and that you earned.
Okay, thank you again, everyone, for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have Kathleen from Ely. Kathleen has a question about immigration. Kathleen, you are now live on the call.
Yes, I would like to know why St. Paul is a sanctuary city and how much of our tax dollar is involved in supporting that cause.
Well, thanks for the question, Kathleen. I hope that you're safe and sound up in Ely and you didn't get too much snow. I was up there this weekend and stayed over at the Grand Ely Lodge because I had an event that morning, the following morning at 8, and actually it snowed that day too. So Ely, Minnesota, a great city. So Kathleen, you're talking about why is St. Paul a sanctuary city? You know, that is the mayor and the city council that would dictate whether it's a sanctuary city or not. So from the federal level, there's not anything that I can say about that. But I will tell you this on immigration. My law enforcement experience tells me that there's always the truth is somewhere between. The truth. There's two sides to every story, and the truth is somewhere in between. So I didn't rely on any news clips. I didn't rely on my conference or the Democratic conference to talk about immigration. I wanted to go down, Kathleen, I wanted to go down to the southern border and see it for myself. And on the week before Easter, I went down to Yuma, Arizona, and I spoke to the Border Patrol. I spoke to Customs and Immigration. I spoke to ICE. I spoke to local sheriffs. And every time I spoke to one of them or the groups of them, I asked them, is there a crisis? And each of them said yes, and they are overwhelmed. And I'll give you an example. In Yuma, Arizona, there is a detention center. It was built for 246 immigrants. When I went there, there was 1,100 immigrants, illegal immigrants in that facility. They had to extend it out into the parking lot and cover it with tarp so they didn't, so the sun didn't beat down on them all day long. And I was standing at the southern border of the Colorado River separates, outside Yuma, Arizona, the Colorado River separates the United States from Canada. We went down there with the Border Patrol during the day. We could hear, and the Colorado River is not that wide, we could hear people talking on the other side of the river. We couldn't see them because they were in the brush. I asked the Border Patrol agent, I said, if they come over and just give themselves up, why are they waiting till the night? And he said, because at nighttime, the cartels tell these groups of people, by the way, each person pays each illegal immigrant pays the drug cartel between $7,000 and $10,000 to get over. So they come over at night because it forces our border personnel to come to that location where they crossed. And what happens is on the left side and the right side, a ways away, maybe a mile or two away, the drugs come across. These drug runners come across, and it's so sophisticated. We don't have the personnel. When I went down there, I saw the people taking advantage of our laws. And I'll give you an example. They came over on this particular night. There was 52 of them, and the Border Patrol caught them, and each one of them had a child on their lap. And I asked the Border Patrol, when they're processing these, how do you know if that child's their legitimate child or not? They said they can't ascertain that. And so in an investigation, they found out that these people, the adults come over with a child, that's considered a, quote, family under our immigration laws. And what happens is, within 48 hours, they are released. The adult and the child are released into the United States with a promise that they will return within 2 and 5 years later for their court appearance. And less than 10% ever come back and show up for their court appearance. And then what's happening, these children then are flown back, they're recycled to Honduras, Guatemala, or El Salvador, and another group of people come back with these same kids. And so I saw the devastation. I saw the people, our laws, immigration laws being taken advantage of, and I know we can do better. I support legal immigration, where that immigrant wants to come to this country and live their version of the American dream. Illegal immigration is illegal. We want to ensure that people go to the ports of entry so we know who's coming and who's going, and that's critically important. And I also was in the helicopter with the DEA on some parts of our border where they showed that some of these drug runners are walking across, and 90% of the drugs that are coming into this country are coming through our southern border, and they're actually hitting and coming to our great state of Minnesota and devastating our children and family and friends. I would imagine that there's probably every one of us knows a situation or knows of someone that has been affected by the illegal use of drugs. I stood in front of a table that had fentanyl on it, and I asked the DEA, how much fentanyl is here? And the DEA agent told me there's enough fentanyl on this table to kill 11 million Americans. And so I think it's just, we can do better, and in order for us to work with cities, they can't be sanctuary cities. We have to have local, federal, and state law enforcement officers working together to keep all of our communities and all of our neighborhoods and all of our states safe. Thanks for the question, Kathleen.
All right. Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have Justin, who has a question about addiction. Justin, you are now live on the call.
I'd like to ask a question about what resources or what do we have in the works from your level on combating the drug addiction and the outfall from that in the rural areas. The local law enforcement doesn't have the resources or funding to get the resources to deal with the problem, and it seems to be worse and worse all over the state. What are your plans, or can you do to help with that?
Justin, that's a great call, and rural Minnesota, rural America matters, and I can share with you that I spoke to a drug addict, and what he told me was, there's an itch inside of my head and I can't scratch it. And he said, that's what I deal with every day. And he's sober, but he said he still deals with it, and so he's working on it. But to your question, Justin, you talk about the addiction in rural areas. We need to ensure that we have rural help. We have rural treatment centers, and that's one of the reasons that I co-sponsored H.R. 1767. This is the Excellence in Mental Health and Addiction Treatment, which will ensure mental health and addiction services remain in rural areas. So those of us in Congress on both sides of the aisle that represent rural areas, rural America, and in this case, rural Minnesota, I want to make sure that the resources don't just come to the big cities, that we keep those resources out in our rural areas and the availability. And I can share with you, Justin, that as a St. Louis County Commissioner, that was critically important for us when we raised our levy to ensure that these treatment facilities were not only in the major cities within St. Louis County, but the rural areas, because we know that when somebody is addicted, when they come in for help, we need that door opened now. Because if that door is not open, they may not come for help again, and we potentially could lose them. The goal is to get them treatment as soon as practical, and when they come to our facilities in rural Minnesota, those doors have to be open, and they have to get the treatment that they need, and then they need follow-up treatment. We talk about continued care, not just for the time they're in that. We have to have follow-up. We call it holistic treatment for the individual. But, Justin, that's what I'm doing from the federal level, to not only authorize but appropriate that money for our rural treatment centers and hospitals. Great question. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Staubers Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have Addie, who has a question about the Enbridge pipeline. Addie, you are now live on the call.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. I have a question that it's probably right up your alley here. It has to do with the Enbridge pipeline protests that have been ongoing for the last couple of years, and in particular, what's to be done about out-of-state agitators and terrorists, basically, that I don't know what else to call them, that are bringing people in from other communist commune protest camps, anarchist camps, to come here and break our laws and put our citizens at risk. On the 8th of May is at the Itasca County Courthouse, 4 of these people having another hearing. One of these people has a 30-year history of breaking the law, traveling the country, going to different communist commune camps. She's this one in particular has broken into a nuclear submarine years back. Her husband has broken into missile silos, nuclear silos. Leavenworth. This is insanity that these people are in Blackberry, where I ride my horse, and these people are putting us all at risk. What's to be done to protect residents from these out-of-state people? The other people with her that day were out of state. She's actually a Minnesota resident, but classified as a domestic terrorist, I believe, considering the the nuclear submarine bit, the FBI discovered that the group she was with at that time, they researched them as a domestic terrorist group. So what is being done to stop these people? And is there any way to stop people from coming to Minnesota specifically to break our laws? Sorry,
well, Addie, that's a great question, and I really appreciate it. First of all, I think that you're talking about the ELF site in Clam Lake, Wisconsin, and I'm familiar with that. So let's start with my support for Enbridge Pipeline first. Enbridge Pipeline for 4.5 years has went through the process. And it's not a, quote, new pipeline. It's replacing the old pipeline that's corroded and needs replacing. So I am a supporter of the replacement of Enbridge Line 3. It's going to be able to transfer that oil in a much safer manner using our more technology, and it's going to bring great paying jobs to our region. We know that. So I'm a supporter of that. But to your point on the protesters, first of all, we can't, if somebody breaks the law or does something illegal, that's a law enforcement action. And just recently, we had in our area of northeastern Minnesota, we had some damage done to some logging and trucking equipment where some people thought that those loggers and truckers were clearing some land for the pipeline. They weren't even part of it, but there's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what we have to do is make sure that our law enforcement is vigilant and that we treat everybody with respect. Keep in mind, we have something in this country called the First Amendment, which is a freedom of speech. And freedom of speech gives people the right to peacefully assemble, as Martin Luther King said, peacefully. Now, as a law enforcement officer, I allowed many people to peacefully demonstrate, but when they started breaking the law, inciting violence or riots, or breaking equipment or damaging property, that becomes an unlawful activity. One of the things that I talked about in one of our subcommittee hearings was some of these protesters are actually turning the valves on these current pipelines, which is backing up, which is putting pressure on the pipeline. If those burst because of that pressure, it's going to be an environmental hazard, and it's caused by those valve turners. And I think that valve turning, it's an environmental issue, very high priority, and we would look at that to be a federal crime. I actually spoke about this dangerous practice in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on pipeline safety a couple of weeks ago. So I'm raising this issue directly with the regulators. But Addie, I know who you're talking about. There's some of the same people. I can tell you that law enforcement in the area are preparing for these protests. But we want peaceful protests, not people that disrupt our everyday lives or damage property or physically harm people. And so my goal is to support Enbridge. And I would have hoped that our governor would have too, but unfortunately he's going at least this point he supports a different avenue of that. He and I disagree on that, but Enbridge has done everything we needed that was required of them. So, but I think that we need our law enforcement vigilant. We're ready. We need people to make sure that freedom of speech is always protected in this nation, but we never allow violence or violent speech, assaults or damage to property to anybody, because that's not who we are as a nation.
Okay, thank you. And up next, we're going to do a quick poll question for you. The question is, are programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security important to you? If they are not important to you, please press key 1. If they are somewhat important to you, please press key 2. If they are very important to you, please press key 3. If they are the highest concern to you, please press key 4. Again, if these programs are not important to you, please press key 1. If they are somewhat important to you, please press key 2. If they are very important to you, please press key 3. And if they are the highest concern to you, please press key 4. All right. Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Stauber's Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have a question from Dylan from Cook County. Dylan's question is on renewable energy. Dylan, you are now live on the call.
Hi, actually, my name is Darren. But Congressman Stauber, you said you're in favor of replacing Enbridge Line 3, and I understand and respect that. However, I believe our continued reliance on fossil fuel results in all sorts of environmental damage. I've always seen conservation as essentially conservative. Protecting our public lands from exploitation helps to conserve our resources for future generations. And as a Christian, I believe we're commanded to care for God's creation. I'm concerned about our continued reliance on coal and oil because of pollution to our land and water. There was a recent pipeline spill in northern Minnesota, and there's renewed mercury warnings for our fish because of coal-fired power plants. We've got a great deal of potential for clean energy in Minnesota from wind and solar, and advanced battery technology has the potential to reinvigorate manganese and nickel mining in our state. Will you oppose making it easier to drill for oil in public lands? And will you work to eliminate subsidizing big oil with our tax dollars? And will you oppose efforts to eliminate electric vehicle tax incentives? And will you support other ways to move towards a clean energy future?
Darren, thanks for the question. There's about 5 of them there. Let me tell you this. I support the all-of-the-above energy strategy. You know, I co-sponsored the Carbon Capture Modernization Act, which is going to provide for a market-based strategy that will not increase energy prices. So I am all of the above. And I'll give you an example, Darren. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody in our district, in our northern district, Minnesota 8, and they brought up that same concern about, you know, we need more wind and solar. And I said, I agree. Let's allow the market to push that forward. And she and I got into a debate about my support for copper nickel mining and PolyMet. I said, I support it. We're blessed with these minerals. We can do it right. PolyMet has met every state and federal or exceeded every state and federal standard. And I said, in order to have solar, you need copper. And each of the windmills is thousands of pounds of copper in it. And I said, so wouldn't we want to mine that copper in our state with our labor standards and our EPA and our MPCA involved? And she looked at me and she says, well, I guess so. So that's going to help with the potential of having more windmills out because we're going to be mining more copper. So I am an all of the above, but I don't believe, like Warren Buffett said, he would never have got into the renewable energy, in particular wind, if it wasn't subsidized. That's how he made a profit. And I think that if we allow the free market to put it forward, I think that's the way that it's going to happen. But as I said, I'm an all of the above strategy, and we have the ability to do it for sure. Thanks for your question, Darren.
Thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Stauber's Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have Mike from Sandstone, who has a question on Border Patrol. Mike, you are now live on the call.
Congressman, thanks for having me. Mike Weber, Sandstone. Hey, Mike, I guess my question is, Mr. Barr touched down on a conference the other day of the inadequacies of hiring federal law enforcement to replace things such as Border Patrol and other law enforcement. Is anything being done to curb the hiring process so we're not losing? Yes, sir?
Mike, I'm having a hard time hearing your question. It's kind of scratchy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Mr. Barr touched down on the inadequacies of the federal hiring process in reflects to like hiring Border Patrol agents and other law enforcement officers. Is anything being done to curb the Grand Prairie hiring process so we're not losing qualified candidates to other positions because we have a 6-month hiring process?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying, Mike, is expedite the hiring process because, quote, in the meantime, like the hiring practices are too long, so these folks are going to other agencies. One of the things we want to do is Mike, when I was in Duluth at one point in time, I was in charge of the training unit, hiring police officers. That's exactly the problem we came in in Duluth, where our hiring from the time they applied, took the test, to the actual giving them a firm date to start, it was like 6-7 months. It was too long because we were losing people in the process, and I think that's what you're getting to. And our goal is to hire as quickly as we can and get these positions filled once the money has been not only authorized but appropriated. And so I think that the goal is to expedite that process, because we're needing these agents, we're needing the customs agents, we're needing the Border Patrol, we're needing the ICE. When I was down there 2 weeks ago, that's what they said. That they're short personnel. They're not. There was 3 things they were concerned about: increased technology in certain areas, increased in the infrastructure, meaning physical barriers or a wall or whatever you want to call it, and personnel. Personnel was just as a priority as the other. So I mean, I can tell you from being down in Yuma that we want to make sure that we have the personnel hired in a timely fashion, because it's low morale. I remember one Border Patrol supervisor that said at times, because they're short, they have to force overtime. And when you have to force overtime on a regular basis, that gets to become low morale, and that's hard on them and their families. So the hiring process, we need to expedite that where they're needed. The personnel is needed, and I can tell you that the agents we're talking about down there, you talk about low morale, but the catch and release, basically catching the illegals and then releasing them with a promise that they will appear for their court date between 2 and 5 years from now, and we know that less than 10% of them do. But I was very proud of the men and women in law enforcement at the Border Patrol, Immigration, the Customs, and the DEA, along with the local sheriffs, coming from law enforcement background, very proud of what they did. But Mike, I understand what you're saying, but there is a process. We know that there are personnel needed in certain areas of government, and it's not only law enforcement, it's other areas, but there's a judicious way to hire them, and I agree, we can speed that up, and that's one of the things we'd like to look at and put forward.
Okay, thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Stauber's Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have a question from Gerald from Evelyn. His question is on Medicare. Gerald, you are now live with the Congressman.
Thank you for taking my call.
Hi, Gerald.
My concern is about Advantage insurance companies that take the Medicare payments from the people, and they won't pay their 80%. They want to keep all the money. It's happened to me before. Another issue is government contracts. Every one of them, they bid on the contract to get a contract, but all of them have cost overruns. Why can't they be held at what they bid for? And another thing is transparency. People got $1.7 million bonuses, but they won't let us see who got the bonuses. That should be put right on the internet for everybody to see. Thank you.
Gerald, thanks for the question. You're spot on. You talk about the Medicare payments. Medicare Part A is, they talk about potentially in 2026 that it may run out of funding, and our job is to ensure that it doesn't happen, because you paid into Medicare your entire life. That's a promise this government told us, and it's a promise we must keep. And so we look at the payments. Unless you're in Medicare or Medicaid or Medicare Advantage or Part D, some of it's confusing. Even for the people that are delivering those services, it's hard for them to comprehend the levels involved in the information needed to make a real wise choice in Medicare. But, I want to stress the importance of Medicare Advantage, which provides beneficiaries more choice which is essentially important. It's especially important in our rural areas like Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. Gerald, you talk about government contracts, everybody that puts in, gets a contract. One of the things that we did at St. Louis County when I was there was, the lowest responsible bidder. It wasn't the lowest bidder that got the job, on the RFP that was put out. It was the lowest responsible bidder, because we know, and we knew coming in, for whatever service we were asking for, we needed somebody that was responsible. And there are times our government doesn't give the contracts to the responsible bidder, just the lowest, and sometimes that's not the best thing to happen. So we know that in cost overruns, that's a lot of times these contracts will allow cost overruns up to a certain point, and that too needs to be looked at. The cost overruns cannot be just part of the contract, just an automatic overrun on each issue for the people that providing the contract. So those are things that we absolutely need to look at. And then you talk about transparency. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to be more transparent. And this administration, the president right now is talking about drug transparency. Why is a certain pill or a certain drug, why is it costing $360 in our country and $50 in another country, or why is the price of insulin the way it is? And our president and this administration, and I believe that we want to get down and have the ability to get these drug prices not only transparent, but to be affordable for us. There is no reason that somebody who, for instance, is on insulin should have to make the decision between the insulin or food or paying for the bills or what have you. We can do better. As a country, we can do better. And I know there's answers out there. We're right in the battle of having those discussions here in Washington. But the bottom line is Medicare, Medicaid ought to be protected, will be protected, and it's something that there's not always an easy solution to that. But I think that when we put our heads together and forget about party lines, we can do great things to ensure not only for your generation, Gerald and mine, but the future.
Okay, thank you again for joining Congressman Pete Stauber's Teletown Hall. Don't forget to press *3 to enter a question in the queue. So up next, we have a question from Sid, who lives in Chisholm. Sid has a question about Social Security. Sid, you're now live on the call.
Hello?
Hello, Sid.
Hi. Congressman Stauber, congratulations first on your being elected. It's about time we got somebody who knows what's going on and is doing something about all of the issues that occur in Minnesota. First, I would like to make a comment that many of the callers that you have spoken to today, and very good callers, but I'm not sure if everyone knows about the magazine Thinking Minnesota that just came out. Some excellent articles on alternative energy, where it would cost the family $1,200 more per year, and a very good article on the tale of two Tims. And not to ridicule him, but my concerns are as follows. Number one, why is Minnesota here the number one income tax state in the country, and we're always either 1, 3, or 5? And the other is, why is Minnesota one of 12 states that still tax senior citizens on Social Security benefits? And then just a comment on Line 3, I appreciate your stance in support of Line 3, as I think many Minnesotans are, but you'll find that in that article, in that Thinking Minnesota magazine, you'll find an article on the tale of two Tims. And he wants tax on gas, and I give such credit to Paul Gazelka for standing up for not increasing taxes when you don't have to. And I could go on and on. The other comment that I would want to make is it possible you have the power to turn the snow off in northeastern Minnesota?
Well, Sid, I appreciate those comments. The easy answer will be to your last question. No, I don't. But I can tell you, the Hardy Minnesota workers, I will put us up against any worker in the country. You know, when it was 70 below, some of my colleagues would say, how do you work in 50, 60, 70 below winters? And I said, you know what? Those are just another day for us in northern Minnesota. That's what we do. And they just shook their head, you know. But we're very hardy. So to answer your last question, I have no power in it. We'll enjoy it because soon enough we'll have the leaves and everything. The grass will be green, and we'll be enjoying our spring and summer. But you know, Sid, you talk about you know, Social Security. Those are benefits that you earned, and we promise. And I am going to do whatever I can to ensure that nobody takes that away from our seniors and people that have it right now. That you can rely on it. You can count on it. I'm not going to support any cuts to that, like some people want to say. And as far as the income tax in the state, I will say this, that I am representing you on the federal level, but you have to understand whether I agree or not agree with Governor Walz on whatever issue we're talking about. I can say this: I am a states' right person. That's the 10th Amendment. That which is not given to the federal government goes back to the states. I always believe that the more local the government, the best. And we can just go right from the townships to our township supervisors and treasurers and township board members, to our local city council members, our mayors, our county board members. That is. I've always said that's where the rubber meets the road. So as far as the state income tax, that's a state. We have to talk to you would have to talk to the state officials and discuss that. But I'll say this. I've been just privileged to serve in elected office for a number of years. I have never had someone say that they don't want to pay taxes. What I have had them say is, please use our taxes judiciously and wisely. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to do, not putting mandates on the state of Minnesota or any other state for that matter without the appropriations to follow, because I've been there as not only a city councilor but a county commissioner. So, and then you talk about Line 3. I talked to the gentleman from up the shore. I support alternative forms of energy. I support Line 3. There's the way the market can drive it, and I think that we need to understand we have the ability in northern Minnesota. We are so blessed with not only the minerals in the ground, but the workers we have and the labor standards we have, the EPA we have. I talked about the MPCA. Those are all regulatory agencies that help us be the best and the cleanest and the most vibrant. And I think that, Sid, with that, I don't know if I answered your question, but you know what? I want to and will protect the Social Security. The income tax reference to state is really that state issue. And I did see the article about the two Tims. I did read that. But just know that I'm privileged to be here as your representative, all of you. And I'm just thankful that you stayed on the call. And we're hardy. This snowstorm that we're having, it's going to be here in Ghana. We're going to be just fine. All I say is drive safe. Thanks for giving me the opportunity of a lifetime to serve you in our congressional district. And I just love the healthy dialogue. And I'm going to get back to work. We're going to be going on the House floor here real soon. So I think we have time for one more question.
All right, everyone. So our last question is going to go to Christina. Her question is about military benefits. Christina, you are now live on the call with the congressman.
Yes, Pete Stauber, how are you doing today?
Hi, Christina. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, you're welcome. I wanted to get in contact with you about a month ago, so I did call your secretary. But I wanted to talk about the year claims for the military to get military benefits.
Yep.
I'm a veteran, a disabled veteran, and I'm one of many that it has taken like 10 to 20 years to get my benefits. And I was wondering if you could possibly talk to Donald Trump about changing the year claim and making it a longer chance for people to get.
Are you talking about, Christine, from the time maybe you developed something due to your military experience until they diagnose it?
No, you only have a year within to disagree with.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, got it. Well, I tell you what, Christina, thanks for the call, and secondly, thanks for your service to this country. I really, really appreciate the men and women who serve our country in our all-volunteer military force. I had the privilege of this past weekend to speak to the Minnesota National Guard, both the enlisted and the officers, and it was just a privilege for me. So your military benefits, you will not have a bigger champion than Pete Stauber protecting your military benefits. The benefits that this country promised you and the benefits that you earned. And with that being said, I will always say this, Christina, I have the privilege of spending the rest of my life with whom I consider the greatest veteran alive, and that's my wife, Jody, the former command chief of the 148th Fighter Wing and Iraq War veteran, who also understands and enjoys those benefits that she was promised and that she earned, just like everyone else. So I will look into that process, but I will tell you, and this is for anybody on the line, we have the highest priority for this office is constituent services back in the district, and we have people on staff that are dedicated to working on caseloads, on casework for you, and that's the most important thing that we do is constituent services back home. In my office, I get to help seniors and vets and other people who have concerns on other navigating other federal issues or federal agencies. So, Christina, I will say this: if you're still there, please call our office. We will get you specifically tied into the caseworker in our office that specializes in our veterans, and I think it's very important. But to your point, I will look at that. What I hear you saying is that appeal process. Give that appeal process a little bit a longer time. So I think that's important. But again, I want to, Christina, thank you and everybody on this phone call. If you are a veteran, for your service, and if you are a family of a veteran, for your service as well, because we know when the service member serves or is deployed, the family stays back home, and in their own important way, they serve this nation as well. So I appreciate the question. Okay, so again, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you all for participating in the telephone town hall. I really appreciated the productive discussions and value your feedback. And again, it's an honor to serve all of you in Congress. And if you ever need anything, please never hesitate to reach out to me or my staff. And we can be reached at area code 218-481-6396. You can also reach us at stauber.house.gov. Have a great afternoon and a great rest of your week. Thank you.